Hello, everyone. Welcome to Lutronic webinar. So today we will discuss about DermaV with Dr. Davin Lim. I think we don't need to introduce Dr. Davin Lim because everyone knows, but let me introduce shortly Dr. Davin Lim. Dr. Davin Lim is director of the QTIS clinic in Australia. Davin Lim is internationally acclaimed dermatologist. The voted as a top 1% aesthetic specialist worldwide for 2018, 2017, and 2016. He is specialized in many areas in both revision and enhancement of facial aesthetic, known for acne scar revision, laser resurfacing, birthmark, and dermal filling. During the past decade, and with over more than actually 20 credits to his name, Dr. Lim has been published in international journal and presented at numerous conferences, as you know. So I know that the DermaV is the products that everyone like to know more, and I'm really happy to share Dr. Davin Lim's experience and his knowledge on this device. And I'm sure that he also had a lot of experience with the previous other devices as well. So this is a great chance to know how DermaV can work in comparison with other modalities. So please welcome Dr. Davin Lim. Dr. Davin Lim, please start your presentation.
Okay, thank you very much. So my presentation is on the DermaV. Now, as a disclaimer, I've had this for about a year and I've been running this for just over 12 months, right? And the slide deck and clinical photos are basically mine, but also a culmination of Lutronic global KOLs and Lutronic itself. Now, when I give this lecture, like any lecture, I try to be fair, right, with things. And I hope to talk to you about science and physics and less about sales. And hopefully you can see why I actually love this laser and why I'm replacing my 4 other vascular lasers with the DermaV. Look, when we look at vascular conditions, right, as a dermatologist, it accounts for between 15 to 30% of our workload, depending on what you specialize in. So as you know, there's many red conditions. There's PIE, post-inflammatory erythema from acne scars, your rosacea, your flushing, your blushing. You've also got your deeper conditions, for example, your periorbital veins, which are very common, especially in aesthetic dermatology, but also your venous lakes. And obviously from a medical point of view, your port wine stains as well. Now, as I lecture from different parts of the world, we got to be reminiscent of, you know, where I practice, and where I practice is in Australia. So like I said, I'll try to be fair and try to present this in a way where possibly if there's more Southeast Asian dermatologists and physicians listening to this, I might tier it, especially with a Q&A, in the context of where you practice. But where I practice, 85% of my patient load are skin type 1, skin type 2, and about 15% of my patient load are skin type 3 all the way up to skin type 6. Now, in this world, we compare. We compare when we want to buy cars, we compare a family-sized car with other cars, whether it be a, whether it be a Ford or whether it be a Toyota or a Lexus. Before we buy refrigerators, we also compare white goods, because this is what we do. We need to compare and contrast. And I think, to be fair to everyone, we compare and contrast the vascular lasers. And the usual suspects are this: if you're in the market for a vascular laser, essentially there's only a handful of candidates, and they include the DermaV, but also the very good Cotera XLV, XLV Plus, and then your Candelas, your primers, and your perfectors. So I always say, you know, with my disclaimer, I have all of these devices. I have the XLV in Sydney, the DermaV, and also 3 Candelas, which I use on a frequent basis. So today I will compare the DermaV and find out why this is the laser of the future. Because, look, in summary, it has both V-beam and XLV benefits in the one device. It can treat pigment, but remembering, if I'm lecturing in Asian countries, it may be less of a opportunity to treat pigment, especially in Asian countries when more than likely you'll have a pigment dedicated laser, whether it be a short pulse duration pico or nano or Q switch. Importantly, when you're after a device, it has to be fast, ergonomic. It's got to be very reliable. And ideally, it has no consumables. And that's the gripe of the pulse dye lasers. And importantly, like all Lutronic devices, it's backed with data and an extensive amount of clinical research from many KOLs of the world. So what went into research and development when Lutronic conceptualized this is basically 5 years of using the competitors' devices. So they got themselves an XLV, XLV Plus, and they got themselves the vascular laser V-beam perfected and primer, and then had a look at the workings of these lasers and basically found the best of each competitors and came up with this system. Now, when we look at the history of vascular lasers, it first started in 1989, and that was the first pulse dye laser which was produced. Since then, there have been many reiterations. So the first generation ones, the pulse duration was shorter, right? So we're looking at microseconds. And with that, generally speaking, your purpura was a lot more. So there's more purpura because it bursts a lot of the blood vessels. Additionally, the wavelength was shorter, it was 577. Looking at the second and third generation PDLs, your pulse duration got longer. We're into the milliseconds, we're into split pulses, but also the wavelength got longer as well, and we're looking at the 595 wavelength. So for those of you who own a Candela device, you'll probably agree that probably in 2004, 2005, that was the sweet spot. Because I've got 3 devices, and the devices which I use most, not the current primer, but the previous generation, because the previous generation, believe it or not, were more stable and more reliable. But I'll go through that at a later stage. So the XLV came in 2009, and that was the first one that really challenged the Candela devices. And they came up with a solid state 532 1064. And then this was followed up in 2019 when it updated the XL to XLV, right? And during that time, they updated, Candela upgraded their long-lasting perfector into something called the primer, which was, I think, a bit hit and miss depending on what model you got. Okay, so when you look at a vascular laser, you want power. You need power, right? You want depth because you need to get to that chromophore. You need a specific wavelength based upon that chromophore. You want safety, obviously, for the patient, and speed, because speed to optimize your time, but also to minimize discomfort for the patient. So you need a very fast laser. And the breadth of application is that it has to appeal, especially in Australia, right, to dermatologists, but also because we have our nurses and therapists use these lasers for simple conditions. We need to make sure that this is simple to understand, simple to use, and of utmost importance, safe and almost fail-safe, right? But it also has to treat medical and cosmetic conditions, like I mentioned before, whether it be your birthmarks, all the way up to skin tightening, skin toning, as well as dyschromia. Now, when we look at the wavelength, what is the correct wavelength? Well, 532 over the 595. When you look, you see, I understand when you're marketing this laser to a Western country, you can say, look, it's got a high absorption of melanin, 1.5 times higher than that of the 595 pulse dye lasers. But the downside when we're treating Asian skin type is that when we try to treat melanin itself, the post-inflammatory hyperpigmentation rate, obviously, you know, from a biological point of view, is going to be higher in darker skin types. So most of you would own the pigment-specific laser, right? Now, one of the advantage, apart from treating melanin, is that it's got a higher selectivity for hemoglobin and deoxyhemoglobin using the 532 wavelength compared to the 595. Now, this is a good thing because you're using less energy. And when you're delivering energy to get an endpoint, right, the less the energy, the better it is for the patient, because that way you decrease the amount of potential side effects from any laser device. So when we look at the penetration of this laser, we can see that the shorter the wavelength, the less the penetration. So the DermaV encompasses the 532, but it also encompasses the 1064, which is a longer wavelength, but that goes deeper into the skin. The 595 wavelength, on the other hand, is somewhere in between, right? So we acknowledge that the longer the wavelength, the deeper the penetration. So how do we get around this? We basically work on the principles of forward scatter. When you use a large spot size does a couple of things. It means that the wavelength itself can penetrate into the dermal layer a little bit deeper compared to a smaller spot size. So a big spot size is good. Now, apart from penetration, obviously, it's much quicker treatment times. But not only quicker treatment times, your reticulation and your demarcation, if you use a large spot size, is less compared to using a smaller spot size. And when the treatments are quicker, not only for you, it's quicker for the patient, which means your comfort levels are increased as well. Now, when we look at the DermaV, it comes in various different spot sizes, all the way from 2 millimeters as a tracing spot, all the way to a 16 millimeter, which can encompass large areas, and is very useful for treating, for example, the neck, the décolletage, and so forth. The cartridge system, you'll see, if you're used to the pulse dye laser from Candela, we know that, you know, changing the windows and cleaning the windows, cleaning the cartridges, taking one out, putting one in, and then recalibrating all takes time. It's fiddly, and at the end of the day, especially for the primer, you can easily, as you guys know, if you have the Candela devices, you can easily break the tip. But for these are metal changeable cartridges. If you're used to the 3x7 spot size on the Candela devices, they have one as well. The great thing with this is computer controlled. It controls the overlap percentage, so that way you have less demarcation, so less reticulation, less chicken wiring, less checkerboarding. It also has a speed control called IntelliTrack, which is very useful if you're doing the laser genesis or toning settings, but also for treating large areas as well. So essentially, it's a fire and forget system. We need power. This has 62% higher fluence at all PDs and spot sizes compared to the competitors. Why do we need power? When we increase the spot size, we need the higher power, right? Otherwise, we won't get the endpoint and we won't get the result. Now, some companies have a large spot size. For example, the primer, right, from Candela has a very large spot size, but we know that the spot size, once we increase, the fluence actually does not have enough fluence, right? So we know that from previous experience. And this is something which is very important. If you guys have worked with skin cooling using gas, cryogen gas, you will never go back to contact cooling, right? Cryogen cooling is essential. And for me, it's you know, if you've worked with contact cooling and you go to cryogen cooling, you'll never turn back. And for you who've worked with cryogen cooling gas, going to contact cooling, you'll find that you've taken a step back in time. Now, why is this important? The advantage of ICD, or integrated cooling device, which is very similar to your DCD, which is your Candela devices, is that it uses gas. And this is a busy slide, but basically it means that we can preset our delivery of our cryogen for a pre, in other words, spray, a delay, and then the laser hits, and then post as well. So basically, we're providing cooling either side of the laser pulse. And why this is important is that it decreases your epidermal temperature to -28 as compared with contact cooling, which is 4 degrees Celsius. When we're looking in Asian skin type, when the competitive chromophore is melanin, cooling, right? You want the best cooling available for your epidermis. Otherwise, your side effect rate increases. Now, how I also explain it is that when you use contact cooling, if you guys are used to using gels, you'll see it's messy. But not only that, there's so many variables that come into place, right? So variables such as, is the contact cooling plate on? right? How much gel are you using? How much pressure are you using? Are there any changes when it comes to the skin? Is there hair there that can obstruct stuff? How much pressure you're putting on, right? All of these variables come into play when it comes to cooling, when you're using contact cooling. When we are using cryogen cooling with the ICD, it takes all of that out, right? And when you take all of that out, it makes it very simple because, like I say, it's like a fire and forget system. Once you set it, it's not going to fire until, if the spray runs out, it's not going to fire, right? So these are all safety protocols which are built in. Now you can see from here, when we're using the integrated cooling device, you can see how effective it is. As the laser moves forward, it fires the pulse, gives you the actual cooling before the actual laser beam hits, and then post-cooling as well. So for me, this is extremely important. For me, it's not negotiable when it comes to vascular lasers. Correct pulse width. This is very important from a physics point of view because your pulse width will determine the vessel size, right? So we know that the previous Gen 1 pulse dye lasers had a very short PD, and with that you have an increased incidence of purpura. But with this, it can mimic a pulse dye laser, unlike normal KTPs when we're using single mode. And the reason why it's important is because obviously for the physics of treating vascular lesions, your thermal relaxation time is important. So vessels which are very small require a smaller pulse width or shorter pulse duration, while larger vessels require a longer pulse duration. And when we're treating things like port wine stains, where there's different size vessels that are present, it's very important that you have pulse widths which are adjustable to treat all the different diameter vessels. Now, speed. Speed is very important because when we actually treat, we want it to be quick, right? So we'll go through the speed test with you. So first thing, speed of changing the handpieces, right? So you can see with this, I'm changing the handpieces from an 8 mil all the way to a 10 mil to a 12 mil very quickly. So it's unlike the other pulse dye lasers where we actually physically taking the spacer out and replacing it with another one. It's super quick. Now, when it comes to speed, we all know the pulse dye laser. When we work with a PDL, we usually work at 1 to 1.5 hertz. So this is the Candela Perfecta, right? So you can see how slow that is. When we're working with the DermaV, let's see how quick this is. So that's Sue Kilmer, that's the actual DermaV itself. So it's using an IntelliTrack system, so it keeps your pulses spaced apart. It tracks it. The overlap is exact because sometimes when we're using the pulse dye laser, we don't overlap as well as what we should, right? We need to concentrate on the actual overlap to get better outcomes. With this, it's computer controlled. So when it comes to the hertz rate, like I said, the effective hertz is anywhere between 7 to 10 hertz, right? And when you look at the pulse dye laser, it's about 1.5 maximum for the primer. It's so quick that when we are treating, for example, port wine stains or even rosacea, it's almost to the point where you have to slow everything down because your brain can't work at that 7 hertz so quick. So most of the time I'm working at between 4 to 5 hertz. But still at 4 to 5 hertz, you're looking at between 3 to 5 times quicker than the equivalent Candela devices. Now, when it comes to port wine stains, they say it's a non-purpuric solution. It gives you less purpura, but less immediate purpura, right? When it was first started or tested, DermaV's wavelength was pitched against the 595. And importantly, it shows non-inferiority. So when you look at the control, which is number 3, that is the V-beam perfecta. You see, it's got a good outcome. When you look at DermaV, number 1, number 2, and number 5, number 4 is control, sorry. You can see that it gives you equivalent clearance to the pulse dilator, which is was considered the gold standard for port wine stains, right? So in early testing, it showed that using the different pulse widths, including your micro, your milli, and your single pulse, they're all very effective. Because once again, we're treating different sized vessels within the vascular malformation. You can see that with the PDL, we get that immediate purpura, right? But it can be a little bit overwhelming with your DermaV, because you get this graying, and when you get graying, you go, oh gosh, is this going to end up badly, like blister? But you'll get used to the graying, and that's actually the end point. So 2 days post-treatment, you still have purpura. That's why I say you do still have purpura with it, but the purpura is not as much, and your downtime compared to your PDLs is less. So these are just a couple of the before and afters from Sue Kilmer in California. She did a lot of the research on this. So port wine stains from Sue. Early treatments of port wine stains by Roy Geronimus. And this was my patient. I just photographed this last week, ready for this talk. So this is after one session, that's right, one session of DermaV. Pigmentation there, possibly due to the competitive uptake of melanin. But you can see for one session, this is quite extraordinary. As you guys know, the sooner you treat the port wine stain, the better it is. So we always advocate early management of port wine stains. The earlier you can get it, especially in neonates, the better the outcome. A good study was published just last year in August 2023. Once again, they showed compatible clearance, so non-inferiority as compared with the 595 pulse dye laser. But then the KTP has much less downtime, right? So your purpura is much less longer lasting compared to the pulse dye laser. Importantly, the KTP malfunctioned 0 times, 0 months. So during this study, they looked at 3 different pulse dye lasers, including the V-beam, the VacuStar, as well as the Synergy from Cynosure. And the PDLs malfunction 6.6 months of the year. So a very good study that shows equivalently good results, less downtime, but much more reliable. So when it comes to looking at the DermaV compared to pulse dye lasers, here it is. It's less purpuric. There's less downtime when you're looking at rosacea settings and treating things like keratosis pilaris, where you have a short pulse duration. It's much less purpura compared to a PDL. There's more applications, especially if you have type 1, type 2 skin, especially when it comes to treating pigment as well. Importantly, there's no dye costs. Our practice goes through 1 dye kit every 3 months, right? So our servicing cost for running a pulse dye laser amounts to $25,000 a year. After 4 years, it's essentially buying a new pulse dye laser. So, you know, reducing your consumables is super important. Importantly, because it's a solid state laser, it's a more stable platform. It's definitely a more stable platform. It's faster than your pulse dye laser, and ergonomically, it's much better design. Now, I'm going to be fair with you guys with the pulse dye laser, and the reason why I put this slide up is, you know, to be transparent. When I'm really pushing it for the pulse dye laser, when I'm after a really short pulse duration, in my opinion, it may not be shared with other KOLs. In my opinion, when I'm treating darker skin types, when I need pulse durations that are, you know, 1.5 millisecond, even with the split pulse of the DermaV, I find that the post-inflammatory hyperpigmentation rate is less with the vascular lasers. So, with the pulse dye laser. So the bottom line is that if you are doing a port wine stain clinic, right? Where you are treating darker skin types, possibly, right? Possibly the PIH rate for your for the lasers less with the PDL compared to the KTP. That's my opinion, right? And that, as you know, is probably due to the increased melanin selectivity of the 532, 1.5 times higher compared to the 595. So this is where I still use my pulse dye laser. Maybe out of 100 patients when I'm treating, conditions, the 3 to 5% of the time I do pick up the pulse dye laser over the 532 for this subset of patients. Spider angiomas are pretty easy to treat. We can use either 2 mil or 5 mil spot size, and that's pretty basic using the 532. Erythemas, the same thing, using the 532 in different pulse widths. Vascular rosacea, it's pretty basic with our system with the 532. Nasal vessels can be a little bit tricky. You can use the 532 if they're deeper. You can venture into the 1064, and with the 1064, it's very, very good for treating large caliber vessels. And if you keep treatments conservative, they're very safe. I understand there's reports of scarring, especially with your 1064 around the alar crease. I think with the ICD system, with the cooling, especially with your conservative treatments, fire 1 or 2 shots, don't pulse stack with it. I think it's very safe. I've never seen any ulceration myself. I've seen it from other clinics, but fortunately for our clinic, we haven't had any in the last 17 years. So vessels are very straightforward with the DermaV. Venous lakes, as dermatologists, we get referred a lot of these conditions, and this before and after. This was my patient just last week, so 2 sessions and the largest venous lakes I've seen. I was quite surprised. It was 2 sessions and it's gone. So you can still, he still has some seborrheic dermatitis. So DermaV does not treat seborrheic dermatitis, but certainly it's an excellent option for venous lakes. And for you dermatologists who treat a lot of vessels, this was really remarkable. This was a patient, we see so many good patients and we see so many good outcomes. I think for vessels that we forget to take our pictures. And then last week I go, oh my God, I've got a DermaV webinar to give. So last week I picked up all the patients that were coming in for follow-up, and these are their photos. So you can see it's a plethora of different vascular lesions. So this, for you guys who treat AV malformations, this is very hard because we don't know the actual vessel size itself. This was using the 1064. I use obviously a longer PD with this, a longer pulse duration for larger vessel size. And by luck, I got most of it in one treatment. This is only one session of 1064 DermaV. And the vascular surgeon who referred this, she failed sclerotherapy, was astounded by how good this is. So there you go, the lateral side of the AV malformation. One session only. I performed the second one last week. So in aesthetic dermatology, this can be used to treat various different conditions, including your poikiloderma of Savart. We can use the 532, but we can also use the toning settings in the 1064 as well. How does it compare with IPL and BBL? Look, for skin type 1, skin type 2, we still find this very useful. It's less useful as a pigment type device in darker skin types. But when you look at the speed of this, you'll see how quick it is using the IntelliTrack. Not only that, it's got real-time temperature monitoring as well. So once it hits a certain temperature, around 42 degrees, you're at that sweet spot. It gives you a beep. And the safety of it is that once you pulse stack it and the heat goes up, it will have an automatic cutoff. So that's why I say, it's super, super safe. Unlike the other devices where you basically have to have patient feedback, this one, the laser does it for you. So it's a smart temperature alert system. using integrated cooling if needed, but most often when you're using the Genesis settings or the IntelliTone settings, you don't need that. Let's move forward. Sorry, I'm stuck in my slides. Let's see whether we can move. So this is it. This is using FLIR, your forward-looking infrared, and you can see that when we're performing this procedure, everything's done by the computer itself, right? So it monitors your tracking, it monitors your temperature. It won't allow you to fire if there's too much heat. So it cuts off at around 44 degrees. It's very safe and very reliable treatment. So décolletage, especially useful in skin type 1, skin type 2, when we're trying to hit both red, so you might have a little bit of poikiloderma and a bit of brown as well. So very safe, very effective for this. Largely replace our IPL devices as well with this. Hands, very good for your lentiginous in your hands. You can use the hot KTP settings for your SEBKs and turn the cooling off. Sorry, we're moving forward to this. What have we got here? So this is using the clear and smooth, the IntelliTone settings using the 532 and 1064. Bruises, it's great for bruises. To be fair, pulse dye laser 532 using other devices can treat bruises. You only need to do 1 or 2 sessions and the bruises clear up very quickly, very efficiently. Vascular melasma, I've always been astounded by this because I find vascular melasma very hard to treat, because I think even when you follow what's in the literature using your pulse dye lasers, your KTP lasers, looking at good cooling, not doing it at the same time you do your pigment lasers, and you follow all of that, I still think it's hit and miss, but we have got good results. I think in the event of T acid taken orally, your vascular endothelial growth factor modifiers and plasminogen modulators, especially with oral T acid, I think, to be fair, vascular melasma is hard to treat using a vascular laser, especially as a standalone treatment. But so these are a few of our before and afters from Lutronic. But like I say, for myself, I tend not to use a vascular laser to treat melasma. I'm more cautious with that. Acne and acne scars, I use this a lot to treat acne scarring, especially the grade 1 scars. So basically your post-inflammatory erythema with that. Active acne, it can be used to treat that. You do have a little peak with your porphyrins with the green light, but you have a higher peak with the blue light, but blue light should not be used obviously on darker skin type because of your receptors for HEV and blue light to increase your melanin production. So it can be used to treat acne using the 1064 as well. Now, how I utilize this is my favorite wavelength for acne is the actual 1064 for acne scarring as well, because I do believe using the longer wavelength of the 1064 will penetrate deeper. It also has dermal remodeling, because remember, with your bulk heating with this, increasing your temperature to around 42, 43 degrees in that area, you're going to stimulate some collagen as well. And there are recent studies from Japan showing the 1064 advantage when it comes to scarring, including keloid scarring, hypertrophic scarring, but also acne scarring. So don't underestimate the 1064, which we use a lot for acne scarring. Another thing which we do is skin tightening and multi-depth skin tightening. So there are many competitors on the market, XLV with their laser Genesis, and also Cynosure with their Elite system, right? With your 5D lifting. So when we talk about lifting, and I always try when I lecture, I always say, think of your skin in layers. What layer are we trying to target? Whether it be bone, your periosteum, your retaining ligaments, your muscles, your subcutaneous fat, or skin, right? When you can understand the level, you can actually target that area as well. So how I explain is that when we want tightening, you can use things like your biostims. In different countries will have different biostims, but this is how I combine it. I think that these are all avenues to provide collagen stimulation, whether you use something as really low as your microcurrent or these fuzzy techniques, or something really, powerful, like your, for example, your PCL biostimulators or your lasers, especially when it comes to treating lighter skin types. They all provide some kind of biostimulation. And for me, I often like combining biostimulatory injectables with energy devices, because for me, if I can reduce the amount of fluence with your energy devices, I can optimize things as well, and it is better for the patient. So often these are combined. So I combine various different injectables and also energy devices based upon the patient themselves and the skin type. What I believe in is this thing called momentum neocollagenesis. It's a made-up word. I've made it up by saying, when we try to push something, we give, for example, a heavy door a big push, but then we have smaller pushes to propagate that door along the railing, right? So for me, the big push can be anything. It can be something like radiofrequency microneedling. It can be a deep chemical peel. It can be laser. But we're using smaller pushes. And the smaller pushes can be something like your biostimulatory injectables, something as banal as Profhilo, or something more powerful as your PCL. But what we're doing is we're trying to get the clinically measurable neocollagenesis at the end of the road. So how I use the DermaV is to have this momentum. And the DermaV basically is the smaller pushes. So I may do a biostim, right? So maybe something like I said, your CAHAs or your PLLAs or your PCLs. And then I follow it up with these small pushes. Because if you think about it logically, we want to stimulate collagen using different mechanisms. We want some fibrosis from your foreign body reaction from your dermal fillers, the collagen stimulating fillers. And we may want some collagen denaturation with your lasers, right? Or even, for example, if you're using your ablative lasers, you want to work on the heat shock proteins. So we try to actually use different ways to stimulate collagen along this pathway, right? And I think that's more effective. So for this, we use the IntelliTone, the 1064 ND YAG, all right? And let's see whether we can get a clip. So this is myself. This is how we do it. It's one of my favorite lasers that I use on myself. And the reason being is that it's got no downtime. So and it's super quick. So I'm in and out of there in literally 3 minutes. They deliver about 1,200 pulses. It feels warm, and that's it. Zero downtime, no anesthetic. So for me, we've got 40 different energy devices in the practice, and this is the one I use to maintain the collagen, partly because I'm time poor. I don't want to go there and have, let's say, a monopolar RF and have to wait, half an hour when we're using the slow heating devices. And certainly I don't want to be using things like your Ultherapy or your Thermage so often, because otherwise, it could be detrimental to your fat. So something like this for me is just right. So these are from our KOLs showing the combination 1064, 532. The reason why I think that this laser is better than the Herald competitors, especially from, and I'm a Cynosure KOL as well, so I'll tell you this is, when you look at their system, their 5D lifting, they've got the 755 and the 1064. This 1064 is better. It's more controlled, but also I think you've got what Carl Cheng says, vascular resurfacing, which is you're using your 532 to decrease erythema. When we decrease erythema, the perception of volume in your light reflex changes a lot. For me, it's not an actual measurement of an increase in volume with the 1064. You do get some immediate collagen tightening, but if you can improve the luminosity of skin and improve your light reflex, your apex of where the light hits and your light reflex is improved, which means it conceivably improves the volume of your face and lifts it. And that's basically through tricking light so that your skin is more luminous and more vibrant and lighter. So when we look at all the low-level laser energy devices, your low-level RFs, your low-level HIFUs, and your non-focus ultrasounds, your DMS, EMS, and your IR heating from your BBLs, IPLs, and your low light laser emission devices, I think this sits in very comfortably. And for me, at least being darker skin type, it really replaces a lot of the devices as well, especially if you're in a hurry to stimulate some collagen with zero downtime. So just to summarize, DermaV is the benchmark for vascular laser. It can do a whole lot more, especially if you've got light skin type. It's got the best wavelength out, sufficient fluence, more than enough fluence, the correct pulse width, and effective skin cooling. The laser, when we're transitioning from one device to the other, can be a little bit apprehensive, right? Because you're so used to one system and you suddenly got to go to another wavelength, another system. I find it, still I find it apprehensive and it can be a little bit scary. But one thing which I rest assured can tell you guys is that the presets on this, and I suspect that Sue Kilmer has a lot to do with it. She's got the presets exact. So most of the time we have to second guess when we dial in a preset. We think, oh, we might have to increase it by 10%, 20%, and gradually go up. Their presets are great. I understand there's a couple of KOLs in Asia as well who I'm big fans of. I think Carl Cheng is a brilliant guy. He's one of the most brilliant dermatologists I've met. He's got his hands on this, and I think he'll come up with his own presets. And I think for the Asian population, he's the one to watch. Ramsima as well in Thailand, Professor Ramsima, a good friend of mine, she'll have her and her group will have this as well. So I think from an Asian point of view, you'll have leading KOLs who really nut out this laser and give you presets, if they haven't done it already, that can really transform skin. So rest assured, Lutronic is watching your back. The small details make a lot of difference. This laser was invented by James Bartholomew, who was one of the designers, who's a friend of mine actually for many years. He's given it a lot of thought. Everything from your ergonomics of it to storage, overlap settings, everything. Even that auto standby pocket where you pick it up and put it back in, and you don't have to press buttons to stand by. All of these little things make it a pleasure to use. Guys, thank you very much for that, for your attention.
Thank you very much, Dr. Davin Lim. It was a great presentation. It has a lot of information about not only about our device DermaV, but also it illuminates how the DermaV plays an important role in this situations. So we have got the many questions, so we can quickly move on to the Q&A. For those of you who haven't actually asked a question, but if you have some questions, you can still ask a question so that you can utilize this very important time to ask a question to Davin Lim. Okay, so let me. I'm struggling to put in the question to the screen. So let me read out the first question. So why the QUYYN gas is important when using PHA32?
I mean, QUYYN gas, when you look at versus contact cooling, right? I always say, if you're in a busy practice, right, you want something that's super quick. So I'll go through a few things. First of all, safety, right? For me, safety is paramount. Safety for the patient. Especially when you're treating darker skin type, you need effective cooling, because remember, when you're using a wavelength, no matter what wavelength, you're gonna get some melanin with that. And if you use contact cooling, your temperature is 4 degrees. When you use QUYYN cooling, your temperature is -28. So from a safety point of view, it's much safer because you have less chance of PIH. The other thing as well is that, as I said, when you're using contact cooling, there's so many things that can go wrong. You need the cooling on, you need to float the cooling with your gel, you need appropriate gel, you need appropriate thickness, you need to rest your cooling plate on that gel, you need to float it, you want to make sure that there's nothing obstructing, like hair, for example. And there's so many things that can go wrong. When you use QUYYN cooling, it's one button, done, it's automatic. So when you're looking at a busy practice, for me, it's not only cleaner and faster to do it, it's far safer and far more comfortable for the patient. So for me, cryogen gas is very important. If you've worked with contact cooling and you try cryogen gas, I guarantee you, no one's going to go back and go, I miss contact cooling. No one's going to do that.
Okay, thank you. So the next question is could you use a small lower leg vessels, and what settings do you suggest?
Okay. Once again, to be fair, so first of all, it's a 1064. The presets are there. You can use it as a tracing setting. This is my opinion only. I personally believe that, and I was training sclerotherapy in the US. I personally believe that sclerotherapy is possibly better than laser. The only thing that the 1064 has an advantage over sclerotherapy is that if you have that telangiectatic matting and you want to get rid of that, but if you actually lower leg vessels where you can actually see it, I usually try to refer off for sclero rather than DermaV. But there are presets there using the 1064.
Okay, great. So we have many questions. So let's move on to the next question quickly. So what's the criteria to choose a sub-micro, sub-milli, or single pulse structure of DermaV? Okay.
So once again, there are presets over there. When you look at the initial data, you can see that, especially for port wine stains, right? The sub-micro, milli, or single pulse is with the before and after, they're shown to be very effective. So it really depends on your vessel size, and I normally adjust it based upon what I see the second time around. So I might go for a sub-milli to begin with, treat the port wine stain, bring them back. If it's doing very well, I stick with the sub-milli. If it's a smaller vasculature, I probably go sub-micro. So for me, it's trial and error, but with a little bit of experience, you'll get it as well. But the presets in it is pretty spot on.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. So the next question is, what's the indication that was not available with pulsar lasers, but DermaV can provide?
Indication, I think, well, when you're looking at wavelengths, right, I think if you, for example, if you buy yourself a PDL primer, right, or sorry, a perfector, you've got your 595. So the 1064 goes deeper. So if you buy yourself a standard 595, you're going to get superficial vessels. You're going to miss all the deep stuff. So when I mean deep stuff, the things which are quite common that we see, your venous lakes, and for me, I probably do about 2 or 3 periorbital veins every week, right? You need a 1064 for that. If you're in the field of dermatology and you're treating vessels, the deeper vessels, your port wine stain blebs, for example, need your 1064. Your AV malformations, your venous malformations require the 1064. Your venous lakes require your 1064. So these are the indications. Now, if you have a primer, right, where you have the 595, 1064, by all means, you've got the 1064 there. But then when it comes to things like your lifting and toning settings, especially with your tracking and your IntelliTone, where you're trying to monitor precisely the temperature of the skin, the pulse dye laser doesn't have that.
Great, thank you. The next question is, what's the consumable cost? Does it require to change the dye kit?
No, this is a solid state laser, so there's no dye kit change. The only change you need with this is your cryogen, your ICD, and that replaces after how many thousand shots? I forgot the exact number, but that lasts a long time, and that consumable is minimal compared to a PDL pulse dye laser dye kit. Your dye kit is very expensive, and you're seeing a lot of vascular lesions. You'll go through between 3 to 4. We go through about 3 to 4 dye kit changes per year.
That's right. So the next question is, with DermaV, DermaV for rejuvenation treatment, is it possible to achieve immediate glowing effect?
Yeah, I mean, the glowing effect is if you've ever had one done, it's partly because of the heat as well, and you get this immediate culture. I always say it gives you this immediate tightening effect, and tightening effect for me is due to your immediate collagen contraction, and then you get your delayed collagen neocollagenesis. So the glowing effect, yes, it's possible, because after the actual treatment itself, you glow because there's a little bit of heat being emanated.
Thank you very much. The next question is, any tips for spider vein treatment?
Spider veins on the legs, I think it's very hard. I think, like I say, the sclero for me is probably the best, is the gold standard for leg veins. Spider veins on your face, just using the tracing, 2mm spot tracing, or even a 3x10, like what you'd use with your pulse dye lasers. That helps with your spiders on your face.
Okay, so then moving on to the next question. Is DermaV can replace picosecond laser?
No. Very simple, no. I mean, first of all, you got to look at the pigment, right? So if you're treating, for example, your horis, your odors, where you need short PDs, it can't do that. And when it comes to things like your melasma, look, apart from treating the vascular side of things, it's not going to reduce your pigment with that. It's just too much heat, even with the 532, even with your cryogen to shatter the pigment. Plus your pulse duration is wrong. So if you are, I would say, depending on the country I'm lecturing in, if I'm lecturing in Australia, you may not need a picosecond laser. If you're trying to treat skin type 1, skin type 2, I think to buy a pico, you might be, it might not be a good first option for you. So when you're treating lighter skin types, definitely, right? If you've got your lentigines on your hands, if you've got changes of your dyschromia on your chest, by all means, skin type 1, skin type 2, absolutely. If you're in Asia, if you're trying to treat Asian pigment, it's not good to use a 532 in the context of there are better, safer options out there which are more efficient. And for me, a pico is still very important for pigment.
Thank you. We have 3 or 4 more questions. So next question is, do you use DermaV for resistant warts? And what wavelengths do you use?
So I realized with your warts, because you got the telangiectatic ectatic vessels in your papillary dermis, so you can use your 532, 1064 is better. I personally don't treat warts because otherwise my whole clinic will be run over with warts. So my colleagues do that, and when you use either your 532, but preferably your 1064, you can get some of the vessels. And that's how it actually works. It targets the ectatic vessels in the papillary dermis for your warts. So can be a useful adjunct. I don't do it myself. I know what's in the literature. My colleagues do it.
Great. The next question is, would you say that every vessel is leaking from another vessel? So the 1064 is essential in order to pick up the feeder?
Just depends on what vessel it is. We always, so the answer is that 1064 may not be the option of choice if you're treating vessels on the face. So certainly when you're treating ectatic vessels in your face, you probably don't need a 1064. But if you're treating periorbital blue veins, then definitely, because anything blue is deeper. So I don't think you can collapse a small vessel just by itself. You don't actually have to keep chasing. So I normally treat small to large, but the 532 would do it in most situations. So we've covered the vessels on the legs, because like I said, I still believe that sclerotherapy is probably the gold standard for that.
Mm-hmm. Okay, great. So the next question is about lifting, which was quite interesting to hear from Dr. Davin Lim. So as for lifting and tightening toning treatment, could you share more your thoughts on this?
Yeah, I think it's one of the most underutilized treatments out. I was kind of skeptical to begin with until I actually started doing it myself and then doing it on patients. It's a very banal treatment, so it's super fast. It's super fast. There's no consumables, right? It's quick for the patient. It's painless, right? So it feels like warm heating on your skin. We fire about 1,200 shots in about 3 minutes, right? So I think for the busy individual, for someone who's looking for a immediate result or a short-term result that they can feel within a few sessions, it's a very good treatment. I rate it very highly compared to, we've got other devices that provide slow heat, for example, RF devices from other companies. I still think that the toning and lifting is very good, especially if you combine that with injectables, because like I say, you're causing some kind of remodeling, even though it's low background remodeling, it's causing some. And then when you combine it with an injectable, your injectable of choice, it could be something like your Sculptra or something like your Alance or your Gori. You're creating an environment whereby you're stimulating collagen. And if we can stimulate collagen from different ways, whether it be your fibrosis from your foreign body, and then your immediate collagen contraction from this, and your protein denaturation once you hit that 42 to 44 degrees on the skin surface, it just makes sense. And as we all live in a society where we're super busy with things, we want fast treatments that are effective with no downtime. I don't think there's any other treatment out there that can give this kind of results. That's also no consumables to the clinic as well.
Okay, great. Thank you. So we are almost running out of time, but we have some more questions. So let me go to the next question. Is there any role of DermaV in melasma treatment?
I think there are a few slides out there from Lutronic that shows, rather reasonable before and afters. I think for melasma it's complex because there's so many different etiological factors, everything from your melanocyte, which everyone's been going on for so many decades, but now we know this, senescence associated with that, changes in your fibroblasts, your mast cells, your endothelial cells. And certainly treating vasculature is one of the important factors for when it comes to treating melasma. So the answer to your question is that yes, it's been shown. There are KOLs out there who do it. I can't replicate those studies myself, right? I think using T acid orally or topically, less preferably topically and less preferably intradermally, is probably a more efficient and safer way to treat vascular melasma. But to answer your question is that it's been shown, but I don't do it myself personally. I've tried it. I've tried it using pulsar lasers. I've tried it using vascular lasers, and I followed everything in the literature, but I just can't seem to get the results which other people can.
Okay, so I think we can have 2 more questions. I'm sorry, we have many questions, but I can only pick 2 questions. So the next question is, for the spider angioma, do you treat to purpura, and what setting do you recommend? Or I think, what endpoint do you want to find?
Yeah, I get total blanching of the lesion. So in the old days of port wine of pulse dye laser, I do treat the purpura, but now I don't need to treat the purpura. So graying of the lesion itself.
Great.
I think Danielle asked the last one about what's your main reason for the purchase of DermaV against the XLV V-beam. I think, so to be fair to everyone, right, if you're thinking about, if you got a V-beam laser, chances are you know your consumable costs. So if there's one reason, I'd probably say your stability, but also less consumables, right?
Okay. So we have more questions, but I think we are running out of time. I'm sorry, but we can, ask these questions to Dr. Davin Lim later. But it was really a lot of information. So I'm sure that many of the audience right now trying to digest all the information from Dr. Davin Lim. So thank you very much, Dr. Davin Lim, for your time and for sharing your experience and knowledge. It was a great time for us, for everyone, and for audience and for us to observe your webinar and presentations. So thank you very much, Dr. Davin Lim. And also thank you very much for all the audiences for participating in this great webinar with Dr. Davin Lim. So like we did so far, we are really preparing with this great lecturer like Dr. Davin Lim, and also we are looking forward to work with great doctors like Dr. Davin Lim for the future with other devices that we have. So please stay tuned with our webinar series. And also I hope everyone have a really great night. And also if you have any further question, please ask a question to us so that we can connect to Dr. Davin Lim for the further questions. Thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you. Good night.
Thank you. Have a good night.